The first step is to download the installer from Contrast Hub. To do this, go to the Contrast Hub URL and log in using the credentials you received via email. If you're not sure of what your credentials are, please feel free to reach out to our support team on support@contrastsecurity.com and we'll be able to assist you further. Once you're in the hub, you'll need to download the installer and your license. I'm installing on a Linux machine, so I'll click the Linux installer drop-down and download TeamServer. Next, I'll click on the licenses drop-down and download my license file. Now we're ready to start the install. I've already moved the installer and license file over to the machine where TeamServer is to be located, as you can see here. Before we run the installation file, there's one very important step we need to perform. There are a couple of MySQL libraries which need to be present on the machine before we get going. These are libaio1 and libaiodev. As such, you'll need to run the following command to ensure these are present on the machine. Great, now they're there, we can go back and run our installer. The installer needs to be run as a privileged user, so I'll run it as root here. We're going to be doing the standard install today, so the default options should work great. However, if you do want to customize any of the steps or use your own Tomcat or MySQL, there are detailed instructions how to do so on our OpenDocs site. So the first thing we need to do is accept the Contrast terms and conditions. We can then choose where TeamServer is to be installed. I'm going to be using the default recommended directory. And as we're doing a full install, not using our own Tomcat, we can select full install here. Next, we need to locate our license file. If you wish, you can use your hub credentials again and automatically pull your license down from the Contrast hub. In this case, I'm going to point to the local file which we have downloaded. As you can see, it then shows us the details of the license file we've pointed to. All looks good. Next, we can choose the port that TeamServer will use to listen on. So by default, for HTTP connections, we use 8080. That's fine for me. Our shutdown port is 8005. Again, that suits me fine at the moment. And our AJP port is 8009. The next section of settings relate to the behavior of Tomcat which TeamServer is running on. So first up, do we want to start TeamServer on system startup? Yes, we do. Next, do we want to create a new Contrast service user to run our TeamServer? Now, while you can use an existing user or your own user, it is recommended that you do go ahead and create the Contrast service user. We can then decide what run as mechanism we're going to use to run TeamServer. In my case, I'm running the installer with sudo, so I'm also going to want to be running TeamServer with sudo. We then get to set the URL that any agents connecting to TeamServer will use to make that connection. This will usually be the hostname of the machine where TeamServer is running, the port it's listening on, /contrast. That looks right in my case, so we can carry on. At present, TeamServer is available in just a couple of languages, English or Spanish. In my case, I'm sticking with English. If you're using a load balancer, you might want to use x-forwarded4 headers to ensure that IP addresses are passed through in the logging. Normally though, this isn't required. Next up, we choose whether we want to use the embedded MySQL database or if we're going to use our own distributed database. Again, in this case, we're using all of the bundled components, so we're going to go ahead and use the default. We then get presented with a number of configurations for that MySQL database. So we're going to stick with the default port of 13306. We're going to install the database into the same installation directory we chose previously, and we're going to create a backups directory in there as well. You're now given the option to enable automatic database backups. I'm going to select yes, as it's always good to back up your database. You can then select how often these backups run. I'm going to go with the default of every day at 4 AM. Next up, we get to choose whether to use the bundled JVM for running Team Server, or if you wish, you can provide your own. Now we need to set the JVM properties. First up is our initial heap allocation. I'm going to bump this up a little to 2 GB. We then have our maximum heap allocation. As mentioned previously, this will vary depending on the anticipated size of your Team Server install. In this case, I'm going to allocate 4 GB. Finally, we have our PermGen size. I'm going to leave this set to 300 MB. That should be sufficient. We can then choose if we want to run Java with a headless configuration. As this is on a virtual machine with no graphical environment, we're going to go with yes. If you wish to be able to send notification or account activation emails from Team Server, you can hook it up to an SMTP server. In this case, I don't have the credentials right now, so I'm going to skip this step. This is configurable from the Team Server UI once you're up and running. And away we go. The installer is now extracting all of the relevant files. It will then attempt to start up the contrast service. We can check the progress of the startup by heading to our installation directory, tailing the server log. We can see here that the database schema has been created and validated. We're now just starting up the Tomcat server itself. Depending on the resources available on your machine, this may take a few minutes. And through the power of video, we're done. The first time Team Server startup will take a little bit longer than usual, since we do a series of initialization tasks involving the database. Once running, we can head out of the log, and moving to the bin directory, we can check the status of Team Server and that everything is running correctly. To check the status, you can use the contrast service along with the status command. As you can see, it correctly shows us that Team Server is running. There are two processes that Team Server uses. There's a Java process for the web application and a MySQL process for the database. We can make sure that both processes are up and running with the ps aux command, like so. As you can see, we have two processes here, the Java process and also the MySQL process. If you ever need to shut Team Server down, start it back up, or even restart it, you can do so from the bin directory with the same command. Sudo service contrast server start, stop, or restart. Let's go and take a look at the Team Server logs. Team Server logs to a couple of directories. The root logs directory contains the server log we were looking at previously, along with Tomcat's Catalina.out file and also the access log file. These logs are really useful in figuring out what's happening as Team Server is starting up or shutting down. While Team Server is running, we log to the data logs directory. This directory contains a number of different log files, the most important being the contrast.log. This is the main application log and will detail everything going on within TeamServer. As such, it's the first log you'll want to check if you come across any errors within TeamServer. We can tail the log now and see that everything is up and running. So now we're sure that TeamServer is running smoothly, let's go and log in. So let's go ahead and bring up a browser and head to the URL that was specified during the installation. As you can see, we get the login screen. By default, the superadmin login credentials will be contrast_superadmin at your company's domain name, which was used for your license in Hub. So in my case, this is contrastsecurity.com. And the password is default1! And voila, we're logged in to our TeamServer.